Hi, I'm Steve, South Florida archery guy, and I'm about to do what I do just about every morning after a day of shooting, which is repair arrows. About to sit down and do this, I figured this is a good opportunity to make a video on how to fletch arrows. I've got some broken arrows, I've got some arrows that I've recently bought, just shafts. These are actually used because I like to shoot aluminum, and I love these old Easton autumn orange aluminum shafts, and I find them every once in a while, and when I do, I cut them down and use them with compound. If I get them really long, like the Easton Legacies, something that's heavy, and I can get like 33 inches, I'll fletch those and use those for the Manchu bow, and those work really well because they've got the weight, they've got the length, they're tough as nails. It's great. But these, I was sighting in compound bows yesterday, so I went through a lot of arrows, and now it's time to fix them and to fletch some new ones as well. So here you go. Things that you're going to need if you're going to be gluing vanes. You're going to be using super glue or whatever fletching glue that you use. You're probably going to want to have some acetone because that will clean the super glue. Cleaning arrows and stuff, alcohol, denatured alcohol. And for all the other crud that gets on arrows, Goo Gone. This stuff is great, but once you use it, then you have to clean off the Goo Gone residue. So we'll start with this arrow here. This I just got. It's been used. It's been in the spinner, so I know that it's straight. And just looking at the arrow, it's got some, I don't know, it looks like they had some tape or something on here, either with the guy's name or just some kind of marking. The knock has lots of glue residue around it, and I can feel some glue and residue from the previous fletchings. So first thing we're going to do, clean all that up. So with aluminum, it's not an issue. Aluminum, you don't even have to be particularly careful. You can just take a knife and scrape off whatever residue is down here and all that extra knot stuff. It's pretty easy to do. So the knock looks 100% better. The glue is gone. Now I just have this tape residue here. And scrape some of it off to get it going. But this is where you get out your cleaning materials here. One thing you're going to need is a buttload of paper towels. And to get the glue off of there, just spray some Goo Gone on here. And take off all of that glue residue here. So yeah, all of that stuff is coming off. And you're left with a nice greasy arrow because Goo Gone is pretty greasy. So now you want to get the Goo Gone off, and I recommend the alcohol. So get a buttload of alcohol onto your paper towel here. Use a new paper towel, and that will take off the residue plus the Goo Gone. And with a clean paper towel. Just dry this whole thing off. And that's lovely. So, still feeling just a bit greasy. Lovely. So now we have a wonderful pristine arrow, no glue on it, no excess super glue bubbling up from underneath the knock, and everything's wonderful. So now all of this is useless if you don't have a fletching jig. I like the boning. I have this one here at home. At work, I have the Bittenberger. I spend most of my life at work refletching range arrows that people have shot off. You know, we rent equipment and rent arrows, so the arrows, you know, just get run through the grinder. So it's very nice to have a decent fletching tool to get this done with. The boning is nice. You can pick this up at like a Bass Pro for like 30 bucks, 40 bucks. You can get yourself a nice fletching jig and never be without arrows. You know, you won't be knocking fletchings off and putting an arrow out of service. Now, you have these clamps here. The clamps, you can come with, you know, helical left, helical right, or straight. This is helical right. That's like 90% of all the arrows you see are going to be a right fletch. And it comes with markings here, so you know exactly where you're putting this. So I like to put the jig down, figure out which marking I'm going to use, and then get this thing in here. So it clamps right in there. The fletching is in there, and it's going to go there. I like to make sure everything's lined up and great before I get on the super glue, because once you get that on, the clock is ticking, and you definitely don't want any surprises when you're when you've got the glue all over your fletching. Now, these veins, I'm using the bone heat veins. These things are really quite nice for target archery, which is what I do mainly. You know, they're low and they're a little longer than their regular old blazer veins. And you want to get, you'll notice on the bottom of these fletches they've got like a little groove, and the glue goes in there very nicely. I like to use the Gorilla super glue gel, because the gel pretty much stays where you put it and it doesn't run all over the place. Now you place this arrow here, and place this fletching on the arrow there. I give it a couple of seconds of clamp time. Just let it sit, let the glue do its thing, and off it comes. I like to give the front a little touch. And yeah, we've got one fletch, and that's the cock feather. The other two will be in red. Now, when you buy arrows brand new with fletching already on them, it always amazes me how lovely the fletchings look. There's no extra glue coming out. I've tried to replicate that by using less glue, and what happens is I knock the fletchings off very easily. So it's not that more is better, but it doesn't have to look pristine to fly well, and this stuff dries up nicely and it's easy to get off residue. So that's on there. Give it a second to sit, and off that comes. 2 down, 1 to go. Once I get the vein in there, I like to put it up here to make sure that it is indeed where I want it to be. Because once you've got the glue on there and you find out that you put it at the wrong marking, it's a disaster. It's really hard to fix. So best measure twice, fletch once. Of course I'm running out of super glue. Lovely. Let's get this on. Beautiful. Let that set for a sec. And off it comes. So now we have a beautifully fletched arrow here. I like to give it a good 12 to 24 hours before I actually shoot these things, just to give the glue time to set and to really cure and get on there. I find if I rush them into service, I end up losing fletching that way. So get a 100 grain tip. Toss that on there. Wonderful. And now we've got a 2114 Easton Autumn Orange aluminum arrow, fletched with Bowing Heat fletchings, 100 grain field tip. Nice thing to have. There's a place for them to dry. So I've got this little thing here. Now, that was veins. Let's take a look at feathers. Here's one from yesterday. And these feathers are kind of big. I think they're like 4-inch feathers. 4-inch feathers, and they're a little high. They're really meant for a recurve bow, but I like shooting feathers with compound, and I lose the same feather every time. It's the one that's nearest the control cables. They hit the bus cables, control cable, and they come off. So a much lower feather is nice, especially if you're shooting these fat arrows. Well, 21 isn't necessarily fat, but once you get up to like the 23s and 24s and beyond, you really need to be careful what you're fletching it with. There are some nice alternatives here for fat arrows. One that I particularly like are the Mounting Zen fletchings. These are very nice. They're very low. They do a really nice job stabilizing the arrow. You know, these are long and they're low, which is, I think, perfect. You know, another alternative here, I've got these little knock-ons, which is another fletch that I like a lot. And these are very good for fat arrows. These are very, very low, but they are a little short. And I don't know, I feel that these things get the arrow stabilized a lot quicker than the little ones. But, you know, you make your choice. Whatever you think is working best for you. I know I have my opinions. So, alright. Actually, this fletch is in good condition. Now, when I fletch feathers, I don't use glue. I use fletching tape. And to show you briefly how that is done, once I've got the feather in the jig, the spine on that one is broken a little bit, but I'm going to be taking all these 4-inch feathers off and putting on maybe, 3-inch feathers. Maybe if I can find a little shorty that would work. I do like to shoot feathers with compound. I've always liked feathers anyways. So this is fletching tape, bear paw fletching tape, and if you can find the beginning, which is right here. Another thing too, when you're fletching arrows, for God's sake, wash your hands. Get all the grease and grime off of yourself, because you're going to be touching the arrows, touching the glue, touching the fletching tape, touching the fletchings, and you really want to not be putting grease and grime all over your adhesives, because that weakens them a great deal. So once I've got the fletching into the jig, into the clamp of the jig here, then I apply the tape. Trying my damnedest not to get my greasy fingers on it. And boom. Done. So, there you go. Got the fletching in there, I got the tape on there. Now comes the part where you have to get that adhesive backing off the tape. This little thing here. And on that goes. And I like to give it a little press there, make sure everything's there. Take my fingernail, kind of press it down, make sure the tape is seated. And there you go. So that's kind of just how I do it with feathers. I really prefer it to tape, and for veins I prefer to glue, super glue or fletching adhesive, whichever. I've tried fletching adhesive. I don't find that it's remarkably better than super glue. Super glue I can get, at the grocery store, at Home Depot. I can get super glue anywhere. It's cheap and it works, so I use that. If you want to use the arrow specific stuff, that's fine too, but it's expensive and I fletch a lot of arrows, so I use what works and what is cheap, what I can afford. Okay, to wrap or not to wrap. Many people, first thing they do when they fletch is they wrap the shaft. That's fine. If you want to do that, I fletch arrows for other people who bring me wrappings. I'll do it. I don't see a huge advantage to having a wrap on there as opposed to not. And again, it's personally, it's just a matter of choice. And if you feel the need to wrap your arrows for your fletching, by all means. But I never have. I've always tried to keep it simple and just keep the feathers glued onto the shaft. So that's 2. Now I've got a pile over here of about 10 or 11, and I'm certainly not going to let the video run while I sit here and do that. But anyways, that's arrow fletching. It's not rocket science. It's easy. If you shoot a lot, it's one of the first things you ought to get yourself. Just learn how to build an arrow. It's not difficult. You learn more by doing it than having somebody tell you about it. It's nice to try different fletchings. It's nice to try placing the fletchings different places on the shaft. It's, you know, get yourself a bunch of tips. Find out what tips are flying well for your setup. You know, your bow weight, bow length, all that. It all affects how that arrow is going to fly. So it's nice to have a little control over that aspect of your archery. So anyways, that's arrow fletching. It's easy, or it's the way I do arrow fletching. I'm sure a lot of people disagree with a lot of stuff that I do, and that's fine. It works for me, and you know, find a way that works for you.